right, so we're always hearing about online privacy, right?
Right.
Well, today we're going deep on something called digital fingerprinting.
Okay.
Forget those inky smudges.
Yeah.
This is about how websites and apps are basically building a unique profile
Yeah.
of you and your device without you even realizing it.
Wow.
We're talking screen resolution, time zone,
Okay.
even how much battery life you have left.
Really?
Creepy, right?
Yeah.
Let's unpack this whole thing using a great article from the Electronic Frontier Foundation,
Okay.
the EFF, called What is Fingerprinting?
So what's fascinating here is it's not even the websites themselves doing the actual data collection.
Interesting.
It's these third-party trackers, kind of like digital spies lurking behind the scenes, grabbing those little bits of info about your device.
Okay, so let's say I'm browsing online for a new pair of headphones.
Okay.
I'm checking out different brands, reading reviews, maybe even adding a few to my cart, but not actually buying anything yet.
Right.
Later that day, I'm reading an article about, I don't know, the history of cheese or something completely unrelated.
Sure.
And bam,
Oh.
ads for those exact headphones are popping up everywhere I go.
Wow.
Is that those fingerprinters at work?
That's retargeting in action.
Okay.
And it's a prime example of how fingerprinting is used.
Okay.
Those trackers grabbed your digital fingerprint while you were browsing, and now they're using it to serve you those headphone ads across the web.
Wow.
And it's not just a few random companies doing this.
Right.
The digital advertising industry is worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So they're highly motivated to track you effectively.
But isn't that kind of like those cookies we've all learned to clear from our browsers?
Yeah.
What makes fingerprinting different or even worse?
The key difference is persistence.
Okay.
You can delete cookies, but your fingerprint is much harder to erase because it's based on the technical characteristics of your device itself. Even if you clear your browsing data, your fingerprint can still be used to piece together your online activity.
So what are the key ingredients for a successful digital fingerprint?
Okay.
What makes them actually work for these companies?
For a fingerprint to be truly effective, it needs two things:
Okay.
persistence and uniqueness.
Okay.
First, persistence means your fingerprint has to remain relatively stable over time so they can recognize you on return visits, even if you've cleared cookies. Second, it needs to be unique enough to distinguish you from every other user out there.
So each fingerprint has to be distinct.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'd be lumping everyone together, and their targeted ads wouldn't be so targeted, right?
Right.
I remember reading about a study the EFF did a while back called Panopticlick,
Yeah.
which showed just how accurate and persistent fingerprinting can be. I bet it's even more sophisticated now, which is kind of unsettling.
It definitely raises concerns about the level of detail these trackers are gathering and how accurately they can profile individuals.
Right.
Back in 2010, when that study came out,
Yeah.
it was already alarming.
Right.
Now it's quite sophisticated.
Yeah, and what's even more concerning is that it's not just websites doing this.
Right.
Our apps are getting in on the action, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I've always been a little wary of those app permission pop-ups.
Yeah.
They ask for access to all sorts of things that seem completely unrelated to the app's functionality.
Right.
Like, why does a flashlight app need access to my contacts or microphone?
Yeah, right.
It makes you wonder what they're really up to.
You're right to be cautious.
Okay.
Mobile apps can collect a vast array of data points for fingerprinting, even more so than websites in some cases.
Wow.
They can see things like when you last rebooted your phone, what other apps you have installed, your battery status, and even sensor data like your device's orientation or movement.
Wow, it's a lot.
And the real kicker is,
Yeah.
on Android, those permissions are often bundled together.
Oh.
So you might be granting access to a whole bunch of sensitive data without even realizing it.
So if those tiny details about our devices are what make up our digital fingerprint,
Yes.
is there anything we can do to change them or mask them in some way?
Okay.
Like, can I just tweak my browser settings or something to throw off the trackers?
That's where things get tricky.
Okay.
While there are some things you can do, the EFF actually advises against manually tweaking your browser settings to avoid fingerprinting.
Really?
It might seem counterintuitive, but even seemingly logical changes can backfire and make your browser even more unique and easily tracked.
Really? I would have thought changing my settings to something generic would help me blend in.
Right.
Can you give an example of how that could backfire?
Sure, let's take the user agent string as an example.
Okay.
It's basically a bit of code that tells websites what browser and operating system you're using.
Okay.
You might think changing it to a really common one would help you blend in, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, make it look like I'm just another Chrome user on Windows.
Exactly. But here's the catch.
Okay.
Imagine you're using Safari on an iPhone, which is already a fairly non-fingerprintable browser because most iPhones have similar hardware and software.
What?
But Safari isn't the most common browser overall.
Yeah.
So if you change your Safari user agent string to that of Chrome on Windows, you'll suddenly stick out like a sore thumb because your fingerprint will still look like Safari, but you'll be claiming to be something you're not.
Yeah.
It's like trying to blend into a crowd by wearing a neon jumpsuit. It just makes you more noticeable.
Ah, I get it.
Yeah.
So I'm better off not messing with those settings myself and instead using a browser or tool that's specifically designed to combat fingerprinting.
Precisely. There are some great options out there, like the Tor browser Brave and Firefox with enhanced privacy settings.
Okay.
These tools are built by experts who are constantly updating them to stay ahead of the tracking game.
Okay, so no rogue browser customization missions for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it to the pros.
Right.
But what else can we do to fight back against these digital detectives?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll dig into further in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore some specific tools and strategies for taking control of your digital footprint and making it harder for those trackers to get a clear picture of who you are.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm already feeling a bit more empowered and maybe a little less like a sitting duck in this whole online tracking game.
That's what we like to hear. Awareness is the first step to taking back control of your privacy.
Yeah.
But we've only just scratched the surface here in the next part. We'll delve even deeper into the world of fingerprinting, exploring other ways it's used beyond just advertising and the potential risks it poses to our online freedom.
I can't wait. This whole topic is fascinating, and I'm eager to learn more about how to protect myself. So to all you listeners out there, stay tuned for part 2 of our fingerprinting deep dive. We'll be back soon to continue this journey together.
See you then.
Welcome back. Last time we were getting into some pretty unsettling stuff about how these digital fingerprints are created.
Yeah.
And, it's easy to get overwhelmed thinking about how much information these trackers are gathering.
It's definitely a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But remember, the more we understand about these techniques, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves.
Right.
And it's not all doom and gloom. There are steps we can take to mitigate the risks and make it harder for those trackers to build a complete picture of who we are. Think of it like a game of cat and mouse.
So we're constantly trying to stay one step ahead.
Mhm.
We talked about retargeting and advertising.
Right.
But I'm curious if there are other ways this fingerprinting data is being used.
Yeah.
Is it just about those personalized ads, or is there more to it?
It's definitely not just about ads, although that's a huge part of it. Fingerprinting can be used for a variety of purposes.
Right.
Some of which might actually be considered beneficial. For example, some companies use fingerprinting for fraud detection.
So like trying to identify fake accounts or bots that are trying to game the system.
Yeah, exactly.
That actually sounds like a good thing.
It can be a valuable tool for distinguishing real users from malicious actors.
Right.
And it's also used for things like bot mitigation, which helps prevent automated bots from skewing online polls or spamming websites.
Interesting. So the technology itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's all about how it's used and who has access to that information. Which makes me wonder, just how aware are most people of this whole fingerprinting thing? I mean, I consider myself pretty tech savvy,
Yeah.
but I honestly didn't know much about it until we started researching for this deep dive.
You're not alone. Most people are completely unaware of how much information is being gathered about them through fingerprinting. It's happening silently in the background, and there's often no clear indication that it's even taking place. That lack of awareness is part of what makes it so concerning.
So it's like this hidden surveillance network operating behind the scenes. I'm starting to understand why privacy advocates are so worried about this. But if it's so pervasive,
Right.
is there any way to completely avoid being fingerprinted, or are we all just stuck with it?
Unfortunately, there's no foolproof way to eliminate fingerprinting entirely. The technology is constantly evolving, and those trackers are getting smarter all the time, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. It's about reducing your digital footprint and making it harder for those trackers to build an accurate profile of you.
Okay.
Think of it as that game of cat and mouse we were talking about.
So we're constantly trying to stay one step ahead. Are there specific things we can do to make those fingerprints a bit blurrier, so to speak?
Absolutely. Besides the privacy-focused browsers and add-ons we talked about earlier, being mindful of the information you share online is crucial.
Okay, so like being careful about what I post on social media and avoiding those personality quizzes that ask for a ton of personal details. That's easier said than done sometimes, but I get the idea. What else can we do?
Another important step is paying attention to those app permissions. It's tempting to just click allow without thinking, but it's worth taking a moment to consider whether an app really needs access to certain data. Like you mentioned earlier, why does a flashlight app need access to your microphone or contacts? It often doesn't make sense, and it's a red flag that they might be collecting more information than they need.
I'm definitely going to be more careful about those permissions from now on. It's like we're becoming digital detectives ourselves, scrutinizing every request and being more aware of the digital trails we leave behind. It's empowering in a way, but also a little bit overwhelming.
I understand how you feel it's a constant process of learning and adapting, but the more you understand about these techniques, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions about your online privacy.
Okay, so we've talked about the technical side of fingerprinting,
Right.
the ethical considerations, and some strategies for mitigation. But I'm curious about the bigger picture. What are the long-term implications of all this tracking? Could it have a negative impact on society as a whole?
That's a really important question, and it's something that's being debated by experts all over the world as fingerprinting becomes more sophisticated and widespread. It definitely raises concerns about the erosion of online privacy.
Right. If they can track us so effectively, what does that mean for our freedom to explore the internet anonymously or express ourselves without fear of being monitored? And what about the potential for this data to be used against us in some way?
Those are all valid concerns. It's not just about individual privacy. Either some experts worry that fingerprinting could be used to manipulate or exploit entire populations.
Like targeting vulnerable groups with misinformation or swaying public opinion? It sounds like something out of a dystopian sci-fi novel.
It does have a certain Orwellian feel to it, does it?
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that it's not all doom and gloom. There are people and organizations out there fighting back against this surveillance creep, pushing for stronger privacy laws and developing tools to help people protect themselves.
That's reassuring to hear. Curious to learn more about these privacy warriors, as you call them. What are some of the key organizations involved in this fight?
One of the most prominent organizations is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF, which we've mentioned a few times already. They're a nonprofit digital rights group that's been advocating for online privacy and freedom of expression for decades.
I've definitely heard of them. They're the ones who developed Privacy Badger, right? What other kinds of things are they doing to combat fingerprinting and other forms of online tracking?
They're doing a lot of great work on multiple fronts. They're involved in litigation, challenging government surveillance programs, and pushing for stronger privacy laws. They also conduct research and publish reports on a variety of digital rights issues, including fingerprinting, and they develop tools and resources to help individuals protect themselves online.
So they're really tackling this issue from all angles. It sounds like they're a valuable resource for anyone who's concerned about online privacy.
They absolutely are, and there are many other organizations doing important work in this area as well. The point is, it's not just about individual action, it's also about collective efforts to push for systemic change.
That's a great point. It's like a social movement for digital rights.
Exactly. The more people who demand privacy, the more likely we are to see real change in the industry.
So to recap, we've got a few things going for us in this fight for privacy. We can choose to use privacy-focused tools and browsers, be more mindful of the digital footprints we leave behind, and support organizations that are fighting for our right to privacy.
That's a great summary. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we talk about these issues and raise awareness, the more pressure we put on companies and policymakers to respect our privacy.
Well said. This conversation has been really eye-opening for me, and I hope our listeners are feeling more informed and empowered too. But we're not done yet. We still need to dig a little deeper into who's behind all this tracking and how these massive data profiles are actually being used.
You're right. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll expose some of the key players in the fingerprinting ecosystem and delve into the potential risks associated with this technology.
It's like we're about to unveil the puppet master behind the curtain. Stay tuned, folks, because things are about to get really interesting. Welcome back to the final part of our digital fingerprinting deep dive.
We've explored how websites track you and what you can do to minimize your exposure.
But now it's time to pull back the curtain.
Right.
And expose the key players in this whole tracking ecosystem.
That's right. The companies and organizations at the heart of it all.
Let's start with the EFS advice about avoiding DIY browser customization for fingerprinting protection.
They make a great point. While it might be tempting to try and outsmart those trackers by tweaking your browser settings, it can often backfire and make you more identifiable.
We talked about how changing your user agent string can actually make you stand out.
Right.
It's like trying to blend in by wearing a flashing neon sign.
Exactly, and it highlights the fact that this is a constant cat and mouse game with trackers developing new techniques and users trying to stay one step ahead.
So the EFF recommends sticking with tools that have built-in fingerprinting protection.
Browsers like Tor, Browser Brave, and Firefox with enhanced privacy settings are designed with this in mind. They minimize your digital footprint and make it harder for trackers to pin you down.
Those are some solid options for those who are serious about protecting their privacy.
Absolutely, and don't forget about browser add-ons like Privacy Badger. It acts like a digital bouncer, blocking known trackers from loading on websites.
So it's like having a personal privacy bodyguard for your browser.
I like that analogy. It's constantly learning and adapting, so the more you use it, the better it gets at identifying and blocking those pesky trackers.
Okay, we've got some tools in our arsenal, but who are we actually fighting against? Who are the big players in this tracking industry?
Well, there are a lot of companies involved, but some of the biggest names you'll encounter are Google, Facebook, and Amazon.
Not surprising given their vast reach and data collection practices.
They have a huge presence online and collect massive amounts of data, which makes their fingerprinting capabilities particularly powerful.
It's a little unsettling to think about just how much they know about us.
It is, but remember, they're not the only ones. There are also countless smaller tracking companies and data brokers operating behind the scenes.
So it's a whole ecosystem of companies buying and selling our data.
Exactly, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, which explains why it's so pervasive.
Well, that's a sobering thought. But it's important to remember that we're not powerless. We can choose to support companies that respect our privacy, use privacy-focused tools, and advocate for stronger privacy laws.
I completely agree. It's about taking back control of our data and demanding that companies be more transparent and accountable.
The more people who make their voices heard, the more likely we are to see real change in the industry.
It's a collective effort, and the first step is awareness.
This deep dive has certainly been an eye-opener. We've gone from the basics of digital fingerprinting to the complex web of companies and technologies involved.
We've seen how these digital fingerprints are created, how they're used, and what steps we can take to protect ourselves.
It's been a fascinating and at times unsettling journey into the hidden world of online tracking.
But ultimately, I hope you, our listener, feel more informed and empowered to take control of your own digital privacy.
Privacy is a fundamental human right, and it's something we need to be vigilant about defending in this increasingly digital world.
I couldn't said it better myself.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of digital fingerprinting.
We hope you found it informative and empowering.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about how you're being tracked, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
And you're not alone in this fight. There are many people and organizations working to create a more privacy-respecting online environment.
Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay private.